So we're going to work our way down to obstacle number 1. So starting with obstacle 3, offering unsolicited advice. It is natural. As humans, if we've experienced a similar situation, we have a tendency to jump into what worked and maybe what didn't work for us and what to caution for and what to possibly avoid, because that's a great way to provide support, right? If the individual or loved one you are supporting is seeking that, then absolutely that is a great way to provide support, because it can help remove this feeling that they're the only one experiencing what they're going through. And it can be a connecting tactic if that is what they are looking for. However, if your loved one is looking for someone to just simply listen to what their experience has been, offering that unsolicited advice could come off as just wanting to fix it, because sitting with someone in their hard time can be uncomfortable. So to avoid and overcome this obstacle, the next time your loved one starts talking about what their experience has been around whatever hardship they're going through, I encourage you to pause and ask them, how can I best show up for you right now? Are you needing someone to just listen? Or are you possibly looking for advice? And then, of course, use their answer as your guide to provide effective support. Now, keep in mind, each time or each event that they're sharing their experience, what they need in that moment might look different. So I encourage you to pull out this question anytime you find yourself in a situation where your loved one is expressing and talking about what their experience has been in this hardship, and ask them how you can show up to best support them to overcome this obstacle. Obstacle number 2 is that support timeline. Knowing when to provide the support can be a challenge for the fear of not wanting to check in and possibly trigger the anxiety, grief, depression, whatever it might be, at a time when our loved one is actually doing really well. So then in response, we of course provide that support right when the loss or big transition first happens. And then about a month or so later, we kind of start going back to our day-to-day. And the support just stops, leaving our loved ones feeling as though we've forgotten about them and we don't remember the impact that this loss or big life transition can carry. And I understand, I know you're probably thinking, well, I can't stop my entire life to support this person. And no, in most situations, that's not the expectation. And your loved one isn't carrying that expectation either. Most people I've sat with, they've communicated that the most powerful support comes 3 or 4 months down the road, after everyone else has gone back to their day-to-day lives, leaving them feeling as though they've forgotten, that they don't recognize that this loss or transition is still impacting them. And remember that this reach out doesn't have to be huge. It can be a small text that says, hey, I'm thinking of you. How are you holding up? And this act will communicate to your loved one that you're supporting that I recognize this big life transition or loss that you're grieving impacts your day-to-day, and I haven't forgotten about you. So in attempts to avoid this obstacle, I'd encourage you to set a reminder in your phone, or however you remind yourself of big important things in your life, to check in with your loved one about every month or so. And remember, the act does not have to be huge. The smallest acts can carry the biggest impacts. The number one obstacle I will hear communicated around providing and receiving effective support is not knowing what to say. And oftentimes this obstacle comes from the fear of not wanting to say the wrong thing or say something that's going to trigger the anxiety, the grief, the depression even further. So in attempts to avoid this, we just don't say anything at all. Or in attempts to avoid saying the wrong thing, we'll say the very well-intentioned blanket statements, right? Of they're in a better place, or everything happens for a reason, or this too shall pass, right? So while these actions of either not saying anything at all or saying those blanket statements are well-intentioned, they can come off as very dismissive and invalidating to the loved one that you're attempting to support. I've sat with many individuals who have had these experiences, and they communicate it as if they feel as though their loved ones or the people around them don't really understand what's happening and the hardship that they're going through and the impact that it carries. So what do we say instead? And this is going to be how we overcome this obstacle. So instead of communicating those well-intentioned blanket statements or not saying anything at all, I want to encourage you to explore one of two options. And you might do both depending on the situation and yourself and what they're needing. But I want you to explore either not communicating with your words, but with your actions, in the sense of you show up. You are there. What does that look like? I don't know. That goes back on you, right? That goes back on how do you best show up just as an individual, but also how can you best show up for your loved one? And this might be where some of those questions from obstacle 2 come into play of how can I best show up for you right now? But be there, be present, communicate with your body language. You might also choose to do this as well as communicate with your words and being very transparent and saying, I know there are no words that I can say that's going to make this better, but I am here for you. Or I don't know what to say, but I'm here to support you, and I see that this is a hard time, and I see how this impacts you. I am here. Depending on the situation, depending on your person, depending on you, what route you go may change from situation to situation, but I would encourage you to explore these two avenues instead of not saying anything at all or using those well-intentioned blanket statements. If you find yourself going that route, imagine a stop sign and go, wait, hold on. I'm either going to communicate with my body language by showing up and being present, and or I'm going to communicate with my words and be very transparent. Okay, so we've covered 3 of the biggest obstacles to providing effective support. Have you run into any of these? Are you currently trying to battle some of these? Or are there maybe some obstacles that I didn't highlight that maybe you want to bring to fruition and raise awareness around? If so, please leave a chat, email me. I'd love to hear what you guys are experiencing so I can better support you. Recap, 3 of the biggest obstacles that I've come across in my work. Number 3, unsolicited advice. Number 2, not knowing when to provide support. And number 1, not knowing what to say. The best way to overcome or avoid these obstacles is ask your loved one, how do you want me to best show up for you right now? Put a reminder in your phone or however you remind yourself of big important things of your life about every month or so to check in with your loved one and either communicate with your body language and show up, or communicate with your words and be very transparent. Please let me know if you have any questions. If you need any more guidance on support, I do have other blog articles that talk about this that I'll put links to. I do also offer a free 15-minute consultation if you'd love to explore what working with me around this support might look like. Please subscribe to the Exposing Grief YouTube channel if you have not, so you can continue to get all this grief content that's both death loss and non-death loss related, applicable in all sorts of areas of your life. Thank you for tuning in. Have a happy March, and I will see you back here in April.